on Teriak's channel. Welcome, welcome. I wanted to do this for quite some time because I myself am of Irish descent. In my first appearance on Speakeasies, I actually doxed myself by telling Teriak and others my name is Patrick Finnegan. It's about as Irish as it gets without an O, Mick, or a Mac. So I feel some kind of affinity for Ireland, even though I've never been there myself, never seen it. It's not rational. If you told me tomorrow that actually, Patrick, you're German, I would still feel an affinity for Ireland. Makes no sense, but at the same time,
Oh, you're definitely Irish with Finnegan.
yes.
Finnegan's pub, very, very famous in Ireland, isn't that right, Tariak?
True that. It's a brand name. Brand recognition, baby.
Yeah.
Not to mention Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. But enough about that. So
And
I am
Finnegan's pub was in The Quiet Man. I've been to it.
Oh.
I actually bought the wee mural and I have it on my wall. You know, I put it in a picture and put it on my wall. So yeah,
I wonder,
very famous.
do women take pictures of themselves slapping their men in front of Finnegan's pub in honor of the Quiet Man? Probably not.
I haven't heard that, no. Tariak, have you?
Just a thought. It's probably meme culture, but we'll get to that at some point. All right, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you on the re-examine. Oh yes, Kieran.
Sorry, Ray. I think someone in chat's saying your volume might be a little low compared to ours.
Ooh.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. Hold on a sec.
And I think I fucked up the layout because I was pressing buttons. I was trying to make a full screen on my end.
Are you interesting? So, are you saying that from Teriak's end? Or are you saying that from your end, Kieran? Are you saying that from my end?
I can hear it as well here in the studio. And then I saw someone in Teriak's chat mention that your mic's a bit low, and I already thought it was. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Let me check up on that.
To me, you sound loud, but maybe it's because I'm on my phone.
I don't think it's insurmountable. I think it's not that bad.
How's this?
The same.
Very interesting. Okay.
See, he's Irish. He's Irish, definitely.
Yep.
Oh,
like I said, we have a Tylenol problem in Ireland. It is what it is.
Huh. Microphone. I got the right microphone set. Interesting.
I don't know what Teriak's doing on his stream. If I can.
Doing your mom. I'm just
Well,
chilling.
I have the other phone here. I'm watching chat, just Tariak.
Huh.
So, yeah.
I've never had that complaint before. But Teriak, most times, I haven't really changed my settings much, but most times we've been on like Speakeasy or something like that, and then there's no problem, right? You can hear me just fine.
Yeah, there's more feedback. I think it's all okay, mate.
Yeah, I think there was like a tiny bit of echo, but I think it's fine.
Yeah,
well,
so we're good to go.
Okay, let me turn down my audio from my headset. That's probably part of it. Is that better?
Just sounds fine. Yeah, I think it's all right.
To me,
I think it's just my stream. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share your video on YouTube. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, sure. You let me know when you're set up, and then we can be underway.
Beautiful.
So, Kieran, you watching the World Cup, or are you straight?
What's a World Cup?
That's the right answer.
I hate football.
Shazzy, are you more of a rugby person?
So I think
I'm more a darts person. I'd rather play darts than
Michael Van Gerwen.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good few Irish players too.
Teriak, you were saying? I think he's dead.
Okay. No, I think I have a setup now, so there might be a bit delay because, like I said, I'm doing it from the YouTube.
Man, okay. This is what. Okay, yeah, interesting. This is why I want to do a bit of a test beforehand. Let me see if I can find real quick a mic setting because
Good, mate. I think we're good to go. To tell you the truth.
Got it. Okay.
That sounds good. Yeah.
I'm a bit of a nitpicker, as you can
Okay.
tell.
Well, you sound a little bit louder now.
Good. Good. Output, volume. Da, da, da. Okay. Oh, that's output. Never mind. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is the Four Leaf Convo a la re-examination show. I would like to thank Shazzy Bear, Kieran Markin, and Teriak for joining me for this roundtable discussion about all things Ireland. As I've said before in this stream, I do have an affinity for the place I've never been to, but I'm told that my ancestry is from. So I would like to first welcome Shazzy Bear, Queen of the Chat, and Sage of the Emerald Isle. Thank you for coming. I would like
Good
to also
morning.
thank... Good morning. I should probably give people a chance to say hello. I'd also like to thank the turncoat expat who turned and ran, Kieran Markin. And then, unfortunately, we couldn't get Jacksepticeye. He couldn't make it, so you'll have to be satisfied with Teriak.
Timu Jacksepticeye.
All right. So, in the news, as has been told in weeks past, there have been riots in Belfast, and I've been living under a rock. I've done a little bit of research on it, but there had been a stabbing, and people have had a reaction to it. So, in your guys' understanding, what has happened in Belfast to reach such a level?
Too many Muslims. See, there's my speech coming in. There'll be words I can't say. Too many Muslims walking about in their burqas. That's what the problem is.
Got it. So, from my understanding, it was a Muslim man who had stabbed a 44-year-old Irishman.
But yesterday or the day before, there was also another woman attacked, beaten up, and a young boy in Dublin.
Okay, so it's similar to what we hear about London. There's mass migration from the Middle East. They're usually Muslims, and they group together, and then among them there are violent ones that strike out. Now, so also,
and this is happening at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, they wait till everybody's sleeping. On the lookout, out probably looking for dogs to kill or whatever. You know.
Does that happen a lot? Are they eating the cats, eating the dogs?
Well, they don't like dogs, so they kill the dog.
That is
They
true.
probably do eat the dogs, like the Chinese. Yeah.
That is true. I think in Muslim understanding, like a dog scared away their Dubsy Dabster. If you keep demanding it, it's never going to happen, Dubsy. So is that what's Teriak? Is that your recollection too? Tell me, among people in Ireland, is this how long has this been going on in terms of mass migration leading up to violence by Irishmen or retaliation in their view?
Well, it's been happening for the past couple of decades, to say the least. But one can even make the case like post World War II, like this is where the general thing has been going on. But like the thing for the especially the American viewers to understand is that Ireland is currently split between like the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland. Republic Ireland is obviously like the Republic. It's a separate entity to Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's still part of the United Kingdom or the UK. Which consists of England, Scotland, Wales, and then the Northern Ireland. And now the British or the United Kingdom like opted out of the European Union, but because of this situation in Ireland, that it's like there's not like a full proper border between both Northern Ireland and Republican Ireland. The fact that the United Kingdom opted out of the EU, they still have this problem coming in from the EU because all you have to do is land in Ireland. The Republic being still part of the EU, and then you can just freely migrate into Northern Ireland. So that's a huge issue to it, and then vice versa as well. Despite the fact the Republic is part of the EU, we've essentially lost our sovereignty, so we can't even protect our own waters. But even the people that arrive in England can also just go to Northern Ireland and get into the EU that way. So Ireland is basically a problem state because no matter what the EU tries to do, if they come through England, then they can arrive into Republic and then get the free travel from Dublin, or vice versa. they can basically come in through the European Union, fly to Ireland, and then get into England through the northern border. So that like it's basically a massive problem now in terms of the escalating scenes that you're starting to see in Belfast. It is this whole kind of like aspect of like our government is essentially ignoring the native people in the pursuit of this, utopic vision of multiculturalism and all this kind of shit, which is basically amassed to we're now seeing attempted beheadings on the streets, and we're told to shut up, otherwise you're a far right racist.
That would be anxiety inducing to live in Ireland if that's the case. You just feel like you're in an open air,
But
not
there is a good,
prison, because you can leave, but it feels like this is my home, this is my culture, and all that stuff. It's got nothing to do with race, obviously, but it has to do with what you hold dear and the kinds of things that
there
you're
is,
losing because
yeah.
an entire unassimilated population from different cultures all around the world is coming in and breaking all that up. And go ahead,
But there is
Shazzy.
there is a good point to this. Both Ireland, Southern and Northern, have sort of got back together.
I was going to ask about that, Shazzy. My Ray, as I mentioned when you invited me on, that I left Ireland in 1974 when I was a kid. So my sort of background with it was more about the conflicts between the Catholics and Protestants.
That's
Um,
when it started, 74.
yeah, and I think Shazzy and I were born at different ends of the town. So I was born in the Catholic area, she was born in the Protestant area, and there was quite bad, like constant rioting and like
Oh,
where I grew up between
yeah.
the two sides. And I was
It
wondering, Shazzy, if this new development had begun. I was going to ask about the
it
dynamic.
has. They're even painting it on the walls,
That
Ireland and
is
United,
that is that on
so
the is that on the gable ends of the connected
yeah,
houses?
yeah,
Yeah.
in
So
Belfast, yeah,
yes. So re-examination. There used like there's a lot of joined houses in Belfast. There's like rows of just walls dividing the houses,
Mm-hmm.
and on the ends there would be murals. So in the Catholic region, there would be images of maybe Bobby Sands. He was like a freedom fighter, a hunger
Sergeant
striker.
Paul,
Yeah, and then in the Protestant areas, there would be like murals of the UDF, the Ulster Defence Force, etc.
Red
Like
Hand Ulster, yeah,
yeah. So there was a real divide between the two in Belfast, and I was curious, Shazzy, and it's interesting to hear that the that's becoming like a common enemy now. It seems
yeah.
is
That's one thing. It's brought us. I think it's brought everybody closer together. We don't care whether we're Protestant or Catholic anymore. We're just
Just
Irish. That's
Irish.
it. Yeah,
It's interesting also, Reed, just for a bit of a background there. When we say Protestant and Irish, the and correct me if I'm wrong, Shazzy. Generally, the Protestants are okay with Northern Ireland being a British territory, and
Yeah, unionists.
the Catholics would prefer that Northern Ireland was part of the Republic, so the entire
Hmm.
Right.
island. That's the general divide there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
and that's mainly Church of England Protestant in the
Yep.
Northern Ireland.
And it's like to give you a state of like how bad it was. Like if I was like before all this stuff, like these tensions rose up. If I was to go to Northern Ireland and I was to go to like a Protestant pub or a Protestant area, and I was to go to a pub, they wouldn't serve me. And a lot of people say, "Oh, that's racist or discriminatory and all this stuff." But like the reason why they wouldn't serve me would be to protect me, in a sense where it's like, especially with alcohol being involved and all that stuff, it's like you're not going to
You
get
can
served
see
because
that.
if you're to sit here drinking with the alcohol, it's going to kick off, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
But as
Yeah.
Shazzy was saying there, like if anything, the silver lining from this is like you've now seen like both Protestant and Catholics, both Unionists and Republicans actually unite in the North and say this is like there's a common enemy here. That's the non-Irish essentially.
the even on that Terriac, I'm a little older than you. The if you went into the wrong pub, you were automatically in danger. It wasn't just my dad told me stories about he once wandered into the wrong pub with a friend of his, and the blokes in there were looking at him, and they're kind of like, I don't kind of recognise you. Dad was wearing a Clara ring, which is like a Catholic ring. He
Celtic
turned it,
ring, yeah.
yep, he turned it around so it was facing inside. Some guy came over, wanted to shake his hand, and He was doing some weird Freemason weird handshake with Dad, and Dad was like, "Oh shit, I'm in the wrong pub, right?" So if you got into the wrong cab in my dad's day, and when I was a kid, if you got into the wrong cab, the cab driver could drive you down to the other end of town and kick you out in the alley, and a bunch of boys would beat you up. So, as well as we had armored cars, I went back there in '81 when I was 11. There were still British patrols coming down all the streets every day, in full camo with armor light rifles, etc. Armored cars patrolling, things like that. So that's the level of the conflict that was going on there between the IRA and the British government, and there was multiple factions as well. There were multiple factions within, and then the police, who were also British. So it was a real hotspot in the
Yeah, it's
70s.
just so foreign to me because at least in America, the markers were going to be a little more obvious. You didn't have to do the handshake thing or look at the kind of clothing or insignias they have. It'd be like, well, what phenotype are they? Are they black? Are they white? You know, that would be the main thing in America. But it sounds like it's a little more scrutiny there because everybody is ostensibly white in Ireland, and so it's
Yeah,
it's
well,
interesting.
I found out we had a visitor from Ireland. Oh God, it must have been 15 years ago. Had the same surname as me, and which is an uncommon surname. My heritage was Italian a bit further back. There's a story about my surname. It's not actually an Irish name. Some guy visited from Ireland. Irish people will do this. They'll come to a country and not tell you they're coming and just knock on your door. And we invited him in. He was a member of our family on some branch, and it turned out he had stories. There was a member of our family who had joined what they call the Black and Tans, which is like a British Protestant type, like a paramilitary type thing, and that whole part of the family's gone. We never heard about them. We didn't know about them. All because of that. So even within families, they had a saying about it's even brother against brother. Or if the young ladies were found flirting with the soldiers, literally get tarred and feathered, have their head shaven, be tied to a lamppost, and etc. etc. So that was the kind of level. It was like a war zone at times, and literally with bombs and Molotov cocktails and things like that. So they have come a long way as far as I know, Shazzy, over the
Uh-huh.
years. But to hear they're coming together, to me, is really astounding in
Yeah.
the
It,
in the
I,
face.
I'm so happy I'm seeing it now. You know, I'm 60, so
Mm.
I've had to wait all these years to see it. But now my grandchildren who are growing up are going to get some peace, maybe, and their kids.
Well, that'd be good, and that would be the external pressure of the migrants coming in. And I did a little bit of research before today, and I heard or read about what was called, or at least pronounced, the Celtic Tiger, in the case of where Ireland became a very opportune tax haven for people to swoop in, huge companies like Google to come in
Yeah.
and take advantage of the economic situation and the leverage they could get out of being in Ireland. And then that resulted in more jobs than the population could give, which resulted in more incentives for people to come to Ireland for these jobs, which resulted in a housing crisis because there were more people than houses and more than you could produce. And then therefore that not only gave a migrant crisis, but now the housing crisis today still stands, and you would have to these days get way more than the average income just to be able to get a house, which is similar to America these days, but actually more extreme in Ireland.
Well, I'm
Well,
actually classed
Yeah, go ahead, Shazzy.
homeless. I'm actually classed homeless right now, and I'm waiting for a house, and there is none because they've all been given out to migrants and other people.
And as far as I know, Shazzy, like when they say they're given houses, it's like posh hotels and like
Yeah,
proper.
they get the best. Yeah, they get
Yeah,
fed every day and their clothes washed.
yeah, it's
You know,
totally.
they
I've
don't
seen
care.
some of the coverage. Yeah, it's
They don't
insane.
care about the older generation. They don't.
Well, like
No,
with the sorry Rex, but the whole like Celtic Tiger thing is like the whole tax haven, all that stuff. It did bring in a lot of the like American corporations, all this stuff. the way that works is they basically set up a headquarters and they either do like the final touches on the product in Ireland or whatever, or they just declare it as a HQ, meaning then they can like quote unquote pay their taxes. But if you look into, for example, like the whole Apple thing, the government didn't even take the taxes that they were due because of these like shady deals that are made, where it's like the basically brown paper envelope job where the politicians and their friends, they get the payoff. But in terms of the actual average Irish person, they don't see any of this like in terms of fruition in terms of them. Like you explained with the situation in terms of like the whole housing thing, Jazzy being a native Irish person is like last on the list, whereas all these new incomers and all the stuff, they're getting put up like because they don't even have the houses available for it. So they're just putting them up into like these lavish hotels, and then the hotel owners are going along with it because they have full hotels and they're getting all paid off and they're all buddy buddy with the politicians. So they get the money about having a full hotel and all this kind of shit, even though they're housing people like from all around the world. Whereas in terms of Shazzy's there saying, well, what about me? I've lived here all my whole life. And they just treat her like a second class citizen in her own country.
I
Yeah.
did see.
And there's lots of people out there. They're doing that too. I'm not the only one. There's
Yeah,
loads.
similar to America with like education. Everybody who doesn't pay their tuition gets their tuition paid for. And everybody who pays for tuition doesn't get reimbursed, even though the people who pay keep the system afloat. The people who don't pay are the ones that are sinking it. Go ahead, Kieran.
One of the interesting things is that, well, first of all, I did see one hotel owner a little while ago who said no. He was offered the big deal to pretty much fill his hotel up indefinitely with migrants, and he said no. He said, I'm not taking that deal. So there's some hope there. The other thing is the number of people is unknown. This was I was following this in Britain. Now, given that Northern Ireland, as Tariaq said, it's not difficult to cross the border from the south. In fact, the guy who attempted that beheading, he did that. He flew in from France to the Republic, and then he just basically caught a bus and went across the border and then claimed asylum. But in terms of the numbers, in Britain, the politicians have been saying, there's 5 million or there's whatever it is, whatever number. But it's funny, the people who know the number of people are actually the supermarkets and the sewerage plants, because they know how much people eat and, at the other end, how much waste they produce. And they had astronomically bigger figures than what the government was claiming. Like millions and millions more were there than what the government was claiming. So it seems to me to be an absolute shit show.
Well, sounds like it. And then so obviously in America, when we have our migrant crisis, we had Trump, somebody that came along and addressed it directly. Is there any one or a few central figures in Ireland that are politicians saying, this is enough, follow me, we're going to get this fixed? Or is it just kind of a moot point because the EU has everybody on a string?
Well, it's in terms of Republic, it's going to be a different scenario than in terms of what Shazzy would be talking about. And like Shazzy can talk about the likes of reform and restore and the differences between the two. But in terms of the Republic, and you're starting to see this across like the EU in general, you're starting to see the rise of nationalist parties. But they're all like in Ireland specifically, it used to be we had our two major parties, which was, Fianna Fáil would have been, let's say, the Republicans, and Fine Gael would have been the blue shirts, the whole kind of like Democrats aspect. Then there was like Sinn Féin, like lurking as like the third party, or like typically like the opposition, all this kind of stuff. But it would have either been Fianna Fáil was in a coalition with one of the minor parties, or Fine Gael was in the government with one of the minor parties, and it would have been the other party as like the leading opposition to it. Now it's at a stage where Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil they came together for a coalition, and they're like the former government, and Sinn Féin is the opposition. But essentially, all three parties are all doing the whole multiculturalism thing and all this kind of shit. So in terms of Ireland, like we are like, think of like 20 years before Trump was even a thing, like 1996. That's where we're at in terms of like trying to build up nationalist parties and all this kind of thing. But at least in Britain, and Chaz, you can kind of speak more about the politics in terms of Britain. They have like reform is like the main one that's trying to get on top of this. But even reform has basically bent the knee to a lot of like the Muslims and immigration, all this kind of thing. Whereas restore, Rupert Lowe
Isn't
is
it?
the only one who's actually saying death penalty should be the thing for these Rotherham gangs and these grape gang scandal, all this stuff, rather than just
Correct.
deport them, because they play on this whole thing of like, well, okay, yeah, the illegal immigrants. They've now recognized that the illegal immigrants are the problem, but it's not just the illegal immigrants, because many of these refugees are just economic migrants that are falsely claiming refugee status. And I posted a link in the back if you want to pull up that clip. Like, that's an example of basically a Nigerian chap, and he's claiming that he's being persecuted in his home country for being gay. So that's why he's over in Ireland. His accommodation's paid for. He's getting money in pocket as well to go out drinking on the nights and all this stuff. And then they ask him, it's like, well, do you have any family at home? And he goes, yeah, my wife and kids are at home. So
My
this
wife
dude's
and two
gay.
kids.
He's fled to Ireland because of being like, you'd be killed if you were gay in Nigeria. Then he has a wife and kids back in Nigeria. You know what I mean? It literally, it makes no sense in terms, yeah, that's the video there. So just listen to this.
Okay, so you're fleeing war.
Excuse me?
Are you fleeing war?
Yeah, persecution.
Prosecution.
Yeah,
Where?
Nigeria.
There's war in Nigeria?
No, it's a sexuality thing.
Sexuality.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Where I come from, if you are bisexual or homosexual, you get killed. So
So you're gay?
Yeah, you have to take off. Yes.
And how are you finding Letterkenny? Are you settling in well?
Oh, lovely, lovely.
Okay. Are you working?
Not yet, still looking for.
And where are you staying?
It's just beside the McGettigans over there.
And all paid for? All
Oh,
sorted by the government?
Government, yes.
Great government.
Fantastic. This is the land of Tien and Og.
1,000 welcomes.
Yes, Kukulin said come and we're here.
And you're out on a Saturday
Oh,
night?
but of course, we're going to have fun out there.
You're happy in Ireland?
This is airing.
And have you got family at home?
Oh, yes, I do.
So what have you got at home?
And my wife and two kids, two sons.
Wait,
Your
what?
Fuck.
My wife
Oh my
and two kids
gosh.
at home. And now here's the problem. Like they'll say, like they'll now say, oh, the illegal immigrants, we need to stop the illegal immigrants. But that cunt is a legal refugee. He's falsely claiming refugee status. Because how can you be gay and have a wife and kids at home?
Now it just becomes, how are you gay? That's the next question.
Why are you gay? Who
How?
says I'm gay? You are gay. You
Your
just
wife
said you are
says
gay.
you're Your kids said you're gay.
Yeah, they think they can come over here and get away with it, but they won't over here. They won't over here because people will turn nasty.
Unbelievable. And here's the thing. I understand because, as we all know, nationalist parties can turn very nasty very quickly once they get in power, because it could be like a whole nativist thing where it goes further than national security, cultural protection, all these kind of things. But at the same time, you have to have a country, and you don't have a country if you don't have a shared culture and a shared value set. What you have is a conflict brewing, which would be an internal war at some point, if we're just going to be frank about it. If we're just going to be realistic.
I've heard it put this way when it comes to like open borders. I heard this argument being made about the USA that if you don't have borders, then logically, if someone wants to come to the country, what country are they coming to?
Right.
Right.
They're coming to an
Without
open
that-
pocket that the EU likes to put people in because that's
But
Well,
now
also
we-
the
instead of wanting borders between Catholics and Protestants, we want borders so none of these get in, you know?
I think I lost my train of thought there. I was on to about the borders. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me.
What country are you going to is what you're getting at. So if you just have a place without borders and people are going there, where are they going? That's where you were thinking about.
Yeah, I was going to tangent a little bit. We were talking about like the demonstrations and stuff. Something that Jordan Peterson, I think, he kind of warned. He said the left will play identity politics, and he said you want to be careful because the right will play it better. If the right decide to play that game, they'll play it better than you, which means worse, right? So
Correct. Morally worse.
and then I've noticed the British media and particularly the politicians I saw the Unite the Kingdom rallies in England and I think in Ireland as well. Tons and tons of English flags and the Union Jack and all of that. Mums and dads, grandparents, you name it, and thousands upon thousands of people. And the government were, the politicians were describing, right-wing fascists who are out there, doing these protests. And they had, the police were actually protecting the counter-protesters who were, so basically there were people counter-protesting against the, what's now called the Patriots. And the cops were on the other side. There was a lady, her daughter was stabbed with a screwdriver. She was out there and she was attacked and knocked over. So I've
By
noticed
migrants or by libs?
libs. Well, the equivalent, so I've noticed that with the policing over there, I've been watching a little bit of that. They are completely captured. They've got a two-tier policing system. They have a thing now called a non-crime hate incident. So yeah, so it does go on to your record, which means you posted something on Facebook and somebody got offended and called the police, and the
That
police
just sounds
come
like a
around.
school demerit. It sounds kiddish almost.
But it's an actual record, like it goes on the record. So
That's,
it's a
that's
non-crime.
what gives me freedom of speech here. You're not allowed.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, Shazzy, I've been noticing that, especially someone like Lawrence Fox. He's been at the forefront in Britain about that.
Yeah.
He's an ex-actor who they
Oh
tried to
yeah,
cancel. Yeah,
yeah, I remember
Lawrence
him.
Fox, and there's another guy, I forget his name, starting the Good Law Project or the Bad Law Project, where they're trying to address these freedom of speech issues. But
Yeah.
but again, Shazzy and Teriak, the UK doesn't have the same kind of free speech laws that America has.
No, we don't. We don't. We're
No.
very strict. That's why you can see people like people getting arrested, like Tommy Robson.
Yeah, I was thinking of him. Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
him, and the classic example is in Scotland. Actually, if you guys remember Count Dankula from
Yep,
what 10
same
years
thing.
ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
funny thing with him was he the main contention with that case was that the judge effectively ruled that the context of words didn't matter. So his defense was it was a joke, and the judge said no, that it's the words, the context doesn't matter. Out the front, a reporter tried to bait Dankula after he was fined or whatever, and the reporter used the words that he used and said
Mhm.
and Dankula said you realise you've just broken the law because the context doesn't matter. But the reporter wasn't arrested.
Of course
Right.
not, because context
think-
matters.
I think the
it's
courts. Sorry, Shazzy. I think the courts. Even the judges. There's a political aspect there. It's not like American system where there's like the Constitution is the head. If I'm incorrect, there's still the sense, and maybe Teriak, you'd be better, or Shazzy, to speak on it, where you still have this, you don't want to offend the crown.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's not actually rule of
Yeah.
law at the end of the day. It's rule
Yeah.
of people.
It's respect. Yeah. When you're brought up with your morals and whatever from the church, you try and stick to them. But it never works out like that. Like I've seen me try and send a super chat with saying a word that everybody else can say, but they don't let me send it. They don't let me send the super chat. It's happened so many times when I've said the R word or bitch, but I don't say bitch. I said bish. They don't let me say that now, even in super chats.
And
Wow.
it does kind of raise the question of are they actively trying to spark this? Do you know what I mean? Because at what point like just to imagine the scenes. Like, I have the video, but again, I won't send it because it's like I've shown it my thing, but because I don't get that many viewers, I can get away with it. But like I can show you the video of this dude like attempting to behead this other dude, and they're more interested in terms of the backlash or the offense that might come on a brown person or a Muslim
Yeah.
or a Sheik
And
than
what about the
actually an
other one I
attempted
sent
beheading
you?
on their streets.
Yeah,
About the
no,
woman who pretended to be beheading herself and she was Nigerian. I sent you that one, Teriak,
Yeah,
the next
there,
day.
there's a Nigerian woman who like the very next day she went on the street, she realized she was being filmed, and then she goes and she starts like simulating the attack and then starts cheering and all this kind of stuff. So it's like in terms of like trying to incite this, it's like it's literally going like above and beyond to
Yeah.
punish your own people. And if you
She
dare
just
say
got
it just
arrested,
even to
but
say something back, the perceived offense is more, and like this kind of like is encapsulated fully in terms of like the Henry Novak thing, that the mere accusation of racism is more important to the police than the actual accusation of a stabbing.
yeah.
It's
Racism
like
is
an
more of a threat
activation
than a
word.
stabbing.
You just say the magic word, and then you can inflict the police on whoever.
well,
But
Ray,
she actually got arrested. Thank
Ray,
God.
have you seen the Nowak case at all? Like, have you seen what happened there?
No.
So this guy Nowak, he's got no criminal record. He's a young fella walking down the street. There's a Sikh, and the Sikhs are allowed to carry a ceremonial knife as part of their religion. In
Great.
Britain, people can't carry knives, the same as here in Australia. This is a blade this long, like about that long, which is
That's not a knife. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that's a knife. It's a ceremonial knife. Now, we don't know what the actual interaction was, but from all accounts, it wasn't Nowak, who the white guy who instigated it. He ended up being stabbed in the chest or the abdomen a number of times. He's lying on the ground bleeding out. The police turn up. The Sikh said he accused me, like he knocked my turban off or something, and he made racist slurs. The cops got down and they're handcuffing Nowak while he's lying in a pool of his own blood, and he died there while they were doing that.
While they
Wow.
were doing that. Yeah, that's right.
So it is that fear of appearing racist that seems to be. And then I saw a commentator speaking about it. They said, look at the Hampshire police, look at their policies, and as one example, because it's one that he knew, and it's written right in there. That
Yeah,
it's
but we've
written
been
right.
dealing with being called a racist for so many years here in Ireland. You know, if you say anything against a Catholic or vice versa, you're a racist.
Yeah, I've heard that. That is just an abuse of the term and it just ends up weakening it, and then people just don't regard it, and then people just,
Yeah,
unfortunately, the effect of that is to just remove your own personal guardrails from actual racism because it has been abused so long. Now, that's not the right response. We shouldn't be racist, but the whole point here is the native population is being abused in terms of their own government selling out their own tax dollars, which comes from their money, which comes from their production, in order
yeah,
to unjustly displace them. And the displacing it isn't it's not a blood and soil kind of thing. It's just a basic rights of citizenry of any state kind of thing.
yeah.
So, I mean, we can talk about the migrant stuff for a long time, just because it affects different Western countries for different reasons, especially from the left. But one of the things that I've never done actually is visit
We'll be going to
Ireland.
Australia
Oh,
next.
I'm sorry.
We'll be going to Australia next.
Well,
Well,
actually, just to round off that comment before you switch gears there, Ray. In Australia, we used to have a thing. I don't know if it was officially called or if it was just dubbed the White Australia policy, where this would have been back in the 60s and 70s. My parents brought me to Australia actually under that policy. There were incentives to bring over migrants. My dad took a demotion at work so that he could be in the right labour force to apply to come here. The White Australia policy basically it began importing British people and Irish people, and then kind of broadened to sort of, once we had all of them and couldn't get any more, it went to like Scandinavian, and then we started going a bit east to like, or south and east to Italy and Greece. The capital city in my state, up until recently, maybe still has the second largest Greek population apart from Athens. And then it went even further east, and it was Vietnamese and Filipino.
That
and
escalated quickly.
Now it's Africans. And the policy gets accused of being racist because it tried to get as many, it focused on white people, right? But it wasn't white people. That's a correlation between that the cultures that happen to that would assimilate well, the people with similar values coming from a similar political system. The political system here in Australia is based off the British Westminster system.
Right.
You know, similar value. There happens to be a correlation between that and race. It's just a fact.
Commonwealth and yeah, it just kept like all of these commonalities come down to physical proximity. You share a culture with who you are physically proximate to. You share genetics with who you're physically proximate to. So these are just happenstance. It's not necessarily racism, although there could be a play in in that just, but it doesn't prove racism at all. I mean, like you said, same Western, whether Catholic or Protestant, general value set. So that would be the compatibility. But like you said, when you start grabbing people from all over the place because you don't want to be accused of being racist, well, then you've kind of lost the plot as far as if you need more citizens, where do you get them? Where there's going to be social cohesion at the end of the day.
Yeah, and also the numbers. Like if you bring in, bring people in, immigration like America, it's been a really important part of Australia's growth. I'm a migrant myself, like I said. So, but it was done in a way that they were looking for specific jobs and specific workers to do specific roles, and they brought in numbers they could manage, and that way the people could integrate, the society could grow, the infrastructure could grow, and support it. But when you're bringing in 500,000 or 1 million a year, or in some countries more, you're just swamped. You're just swamped.
All right. I do have a question that I was asking some friends about questions about Ireland and history in general. And of course, you can't talk about Ireland without talking about English impact. And one of my friends was asking, he has a question about what they know about the life and execution of Roger Casement, a Brit setting up the Irish for pursuing independence. Does anybody have any comments on Roger Casement and his history?
I'm not personally familiar with it.
I'm
Teriak?
not either.
No.
I don't know about Roger Casement, but like I do have a bit in terms of like the history of like how like Ireland came to be and all that kind of stuff. Because when we're talking about like what would delineate, let's say, an Englishman from an Irishman, like an Englishman would be like typically from like the Anglo-Saxon. You know what I mean? Like from the Anglo-Normans, that goes back to like the 1100s essentially. And all this kind of stuff. Whereas like both the Irish and the Scottish would be more of a Celtic or Gaelic ancestry, but it still is that kind of amalgamation between like the Vikings, the Norse, like
Vikings,
Germanic, and all that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Welsh as well is would be typically like the Welsh language would be in terms of like the Gaelic and all this kind of stuff. How the Republic came to be was basically from like I think like 1700s or 1800s onwards, there was this big push for like Ireland to have its own independence and have its own say, and then basically it culminated with like the Easter Rising essentially in 1916.
Michael Collins.
Michael Collins and Eamon de Valera. And essentially what happened was it was basically, and this was kind of like in the build up to World War II, where like England, the Irish knew that like the English, like their main attention was in terms of like what was going on with Germany and all this kind of stuff. That's when we were like, this is our chance, boys. And then they basically led this rebellion. Think of it like a January 6th, but like much more violent in terms of like actually taking control of the capital, all this kind of stuff. And it was the location was the GPO, the General Post Office. Now, it was a failed attempt. And basically all the leaders were lined up and they were all executed, except for one, Eamon de Valera. And to the point where they execute these leaders, there was a guy called James Connolly. And he had already sustained enough injuries that he was going to die in the next coming days anyway. He couldn't even stand up. And they basically they strapped him to a chair and they execute him anyway, firing squad. But they couldn't execute Eamon de Valera because he was born in America. He had an American passport. So
Yeah.
the British were like, if we execute him, then all of a sudden we're going to have America on our back and all this kind of stuff. So they let him go free, but then he had his like protege Michael Collins, who wasn't a leader in terms of the 1916, but he ended up being like the crucial figure who was kind of like the mastermind behind like undermining the British after that. And then we had our Irish War of Independence in the 1920s, essentially during the like that kind of like World War One time period. And eventually kind of went back and forth till they had the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which basically was that established the Irish Free State. And the whole kind of aspect of what fueled this with the Irish people is that we didn't want the British Parliament, very similar to the Americans, we didn't want the British Parliament being dictating the laws of the land. We wanted what was called like a home rule, like this whole aspect that we were going to dictate our own laws on our own island and all this kind of stuff. And basically, the agreement that was taking place from that was that essentially like Britain would still retain control of the 6 counties in the north of Ireland, whereas the rest of the 26 counties would then have their own like republic essentially. Now, as an Irishman and Republican, like my whole kind of aspect to this was like I can understand why the British would be hesitant to allow the Irish to have like free reign, because Ireland geographically would be a back door to England. So England being a prominent like superpower at the time, they couldn't allow essentially the island of Ireland to become like to be able to do whatever it wanted, because if it started getting buddy with the Germans, or if it started getting buddy with Rome, the Vatican City, then all of a sudden that would weaken that would be a huge weakness for the British imperial system essentially. But after the like it basically kind of culminated after World War II, that's when you get the actual Republic of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland Act in 1948. And then from there, and just to give you an idea like of how much of a threat like Ireland actually was to England, like this is a typical joke that's thrown out, but it actually is a fact. Like the Irish were the only Western nation to actually send condolences to Germany after World War II, after Adolf apparently killed himself and all that shit. So
That's
just in
right.
terms of like how much of a threat that Ireland actually was to England in terms of that aspect, and a lot of that is got to do with like it goes back to the famine and all this kind of stuff, rather than actually moving on and trying to look forward in the future. There always is that kind of thing of looking back in the past. And it's the same thing that like I kind of talked about this with when people like Jewsburg and all this kind of shit. There's a similar kind of phenomenon in Ireland where it's like they'd Englishburg, where it'd be like if it was to rain that day, well, don't you know it's because the English control the weather, it's the English fault and all this kind of stuff as well, rather than actually trying to move on from that. But in terms of this whole aspect, even though the Republic of Ireland Act was in 1948, then essentially you start seeing a push more so, or concentration in terms of Northern Ireland, the whole like get the Brits out and all this kind of stuff. And then you have like the Troubles, which I think Shazzy, that'd be a good segue if Shazzy wanted to kind of describe the like how bad the Troubles were and all this stuff. But the IRA still wanted to push to get to 32 counties, and then essentially it culminates with the Good Friday Agreement that basically, if it is voted by the Northern Irish people that they want to break away from the Union and join the Republic, then it's up to them. They can declare a referendum on it at any point, but it's never been enacted, or it's never been actually put forward. But my counter to it at this stage is, as a Northern Irish person, would you really want to join the Republic now, seeing as the Republic doesn't have any sovereignty? It's all Brussels that controls and dictates what happens in Ireland. But Shazzy, if you want to kind of talk about the Troubles.
Well, Kieran would be first in the Troubles because he had to leave when he was 4.
Yeah, most of my experiences there were really stories from my dad. Like I said, I was 4 when we left, but there were some pretty full-on stories. Like, for example, we lived above a shop at one point. My parents were renting a little room above a shop. They were only young. I was 4, so Dad would have been 24, Mum would have been 23 or 24, and they were there with me and my brother. And one day or one night, a riot broke out in the street down below, and the soldiers were breaking into every corner residence as a vantage point. So they came up the stairs with the Armalite rifles, etc. They bailed our family up against the wall with the machine guns pointed at us, and or with the rifles pointed at us. They're calling my dad an Irish asshole and all this because they were Scottish soldiers. They smashed out the windows and they were shooting at rioters out through the windows. So that was one typical thing, or for example, my grandmother was walking down the street and found herself having to step back into a shop doorway. You know, sometimes the doorway's a bit set back. The shop was closed.
Mhm.
She had to step back into there and just wait in the corner because there was riots going on. Now, riots would consist of soldiers with armored cars and rubber bullets going in one direction, and blokes in masks and scarves throwing Molotov cocktails the other way. And then there were some famous incidents like Sunday Bloody Sunday, written about by you too. I think it was 12 or 13 Shazzy who were killed that day.
Yeah,
Um,
there's actually a film on YouTube about it.
yeah,
Sunday, Sunday.
that was like a tinderbox moment where the two sides were facing off with a barrier or something in the middle, and then a gunshot went off somewhere, and then the whole thing just went crazy.
And they just
Um,
kept
and
shooting.
and the British also had like a what they called a special, I think it was called special powers law in Northern Ireland, which meant the according to my dad anyway, what he told me was the military could break into your home, arrest anyone without charges, put him in jail indefinitely, and so basically political prisoners. And in my dad was telling me pretty much everyone we knew over there was not far removed from somebody who was in a
Yeah.
who was in a political in a prison who'd been dragged away.
Hmm.
So and then you had things like the when I went back in '81 and was staying with my grandparents in a little town called Ivy in Belfast, in those attached houses, and I went to the window because there was like a group of soldiers walking in formation down the centre of the road, and I went to the window to look out the curtain, and my dad grabbed me and said, "Don't open the curtain." I said, "Why?" He said, like they're all 18. I think they do their first tour of duty or something in Northern Ireland. You have to spend 6 months there." He said they could be trigger happy if they see you swipe the
Yeah.
window, they turn around and shoot you. They'd walk down the end of the street, then they'd stop, look around, separate a bit, and then walk down the other way. And I said to Dad, "Why are they walking on the road?" And he said, "Because the IRA used to put bombs down the drain pipes on the corners and on the walls of the buildings, and so they walk in the road now so that they're further away from a potential threat." So they were the kind of the kind of things that were going on then. There were other stories. Mum, I think when Mum was pregnant with me, she was standing out the front in the street, and some bloke got down on one knee behind her and started throwing stuff at the armored cars going past. So it was a pretty brutal period. Very
And
and a lot, also Shazzy, like a lot of antagonism between both sides. Like
yeah,
they that they would goad each other. So there's a famous is it the Orange Man March,
yeah.
Shazzy?
On the 12th of July, it's coming up soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So
is
the
it now
Orange
when you hold on real quick? When it's Orange Man, is that a reference to Irish Protestants or what is it?
yeah,
They're
yeah,
loyalists.
loyalist.
Loyalists, yeah.
And
Protestant
they'll do a
loyalists.
and on the 12th of July they'll do a march, which is like with the drums and I think Irish bagpipes and things
Yeah.
and
Lumbags, everything. Yeah.
all the regalia, and they would make a point of marching through the Catholic areas, right? So just to kind of stick it to them a little bit. So there was that kind of thing going on.
They're not allowed to do that now. That walk has stopped
Has it?
for a few years now. That walk has stopped. Yeah.
I was talking to someone over there, like a relative at one point. It was after the 80s, but was I talking to someone or I saw someone talking about it from Ireland who said that what was starting to change at that point was they were opening up schools that had Catholics and Protestants who would go
Yeah.
together. And the kids were kind of becoming friends, and that was the beginning of kind of breaking down those kind of prejudices.
Mostly all the schools now are, both, Protestant and Catholic. All the
Yeah, that's
schools now are like that. Yeah.
Yeah, compared to back in the 70s, that would have been unheard of. Like it was.
No, that is so true. There was one Catholic school where I lived, and then there was the high school. So of course I was sent to the high school, not the Catholic school, but some of my friends sent their kids to the St. Anne's Catholic school, and they ended up being smart people, you know.
Yeah.
It's good teaching there, where the rest of us were, can't wait till school ends. It was so boring. I know I was bored to tears. Down my area, we didn't have what Kieran had to live with. It was mostly loyalists who go on strike and don't allow you out of your home. You weren't
Wow.
allowed to leave. You weren't allowed to go to work. They didn't stop my dad. Um, he just says, "Pay me. I have 5 kids here. Pay me my wage. Other than that, fuck off." And he got in his car and drove off.
Was that because they were striking?
They were striking. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was.
I heard some of the
I think
strike.
that was. I think that was in the late 70s. I think.
Yeah, that
In
was
the
similar. Like,
Republic?
No, in Northern Ireland.
Oh, Northern.
yeah.
Okay. I thought you
I
said.
think
I guess I imagined that in Northern Ireland would be the most of the conflict, then, right? But you said you were in
Yeah,
a part that wasn't so conflict ridden.
yeah, it wasn't as bad as Cairn. They didn't have guns on the street, but it was just the loyalists, you know. And if you were Catholic, you didn't get to stay long. Do you know that just recently there's a graveyard at Ballybester? My dad's in it, and my mum, whatever. And they're in the Protestant section, and there was a part for the Catholics. But now, because there's hardly any Catholics, the Protestants have taken that part over now. The council have given it to the Protestants.
right.
That is sad. You know that the Catholic Church was burnt down in the 70s
By riots.
by the UDA. Yeah, because I was actually out with my mum. They did it at 10:30 at night, and me and my mum and her friend were down the street, and we were actually watching the Catholic Church going fire. And what they were scared of was because the Loyalist pub was like 3 doors away. The central pub was just, on the corner, so it nearly got on fire. It nearly backfired on them.
Would you say at this point the least of Ireland's troubles has to do with the English and the division between Catholic and Protestant? And now it's come down to focused on the migrant crisis.
It's the migrant crisis, but it's still England because they're part of it. They are part of it.
Well, as we remember in years past, Scotland attempted a referendum to separate entirely. Has Ireland done anything quite to that scale?
Yeah, that's what I would have.
Yeah.
That's what I was bringing up the Good Friday Agreement. Part of the Good Friday Agreement is that Northern Ireland can have a referendum on that very issue of like either Northern Ireland joining with the Republic or remaining loyalist. That's part of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the IRA would say that like that the Good Friday Agreement was just suits coming in and just like basically undermining like their whole fight for like what they would call Irish freedom. But the reason why, especially like from my point of view, that it's like this whole thing of like trying to blame the Englishmen and all this kind of stuff for the current cause is that the Republic of Ireland, like they've shown, especially with the fact that they've just given their sovereignty to Brussels, and now they've passed a certain thing where it's like the EU Migration Pact, where it's Brussels who decides how many like immigrants and refugees Ireland has to take versus like England, and like so it's this whole thing of like the people realizing their politicians have sold them out. Like
Yeah,
this
so you
whole
have
kind of
two
like
back
divide that
doors.
was,
You've got the EU and you've got England.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of these things where for national security it makes sense for Ireland to unify. But how
Nice
does that
to-
go down? Does the Ireland unify and then they join the United Kingdom, or does Ireland unify and they remain as part of this like EU bollocksology that they've mixed together. Do you know what I mean? It's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right. And then, of course, as you've seen with England, once you leave the EU, they economically and socially punish you.
Yep.
It's like on the 12th of July, it's Glasgow, Scotland, black bands and whatever else come over to Northern Ireland. You don't see no English bands. You know, it's Northern Ireland and Scotland on the 12th.
Yeah.
You'll always see a Scottish flag.
And
We
it is
always
this whole
did.
thing. Sorry to cut you off, Shadi, but it is this whole thing of like where like England and like Germany, like that whole kind of like, and maybe bits of France as well, like that's the whole like Britannia and all this kind of stuff.
The
Or
Scottish
Britain.
hate the English.
Yeah, like because like the Scottish itself is like a Gaelic, like they have like that Celtic ancestry, whereas the very beautiful picture there. But the
I don't know if Shazzy, are you familiar with Genesis album "Selling England by the Pound"? It's one of my favorites of all time. It reminds me of the opening line from "Dancing with the Moonlit Night." Can you tell me where my country lies? That's comes
All
to
right.
mind.
I was going to try and put my camera on because I'm going to show you the original plan map of Ireland because I have one. Hold on.
And while you're doing that,
I'll
I
take it
also
off the
have.
wall if I can get it off.
I couldn't find. I can't think of an Irish equivalent in terms of progressive rock. But then there's also "Misplaced Childhood" by Marillion, and the lead singer of that is Scottish. So there's, but I can't think of a whole lot of Irish concept albums that have to do with Irish patriotism. But it just,
Well, like
the
that,
sentiment comes to mind with that. Abe
but like
Dinkus asks, "Do you know where the word nice originated?" And I no.
is it from Nice, French,
It's
of course.
French. Well, I can't get them off the wall. I'll have to take it and send you it because my left arm's not working. I can't get it to lift it off.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. But I will take a picture and send. But it shows you all the original counties of Ireland, what they were used to be called. You know, like Munster, and if you wanted to know all the real towns, I thought I would take a picture and I'll send it.
Mr. President says it means to be ignorant. Yeah, I remember Charlie Kirk talking about that.
Yeah, because it is this whole thing of like what we've conflated in modern day, especially, is that to be a nice guy means to be a good guy, right?
Yeah.
Which is it's completely backwards. Where it's like I'd rather have good men that aren't very nice versus nice men that aren't good. And like when you're talking about good, you're talking about like moral men. And it's like this whole thing of like when they say like smoky man bad. Oh, Andrew Wilson, he smokes and he drinks. Those are immoral. No, it might be unmannerly. It might be rude. He might be rude or whatever. But in terms of like this whole dichotomy of if you believe that good things should happen to good people and bad things should happen to bad people, then good men must be capable of bad things in order to keep the bad men away or the bad men at the door. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's conflation
I mean,
between
in that
manners
case,
and morality and everything.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, I think in that case it would be depending on what you're talking about, I think it'd be a good thing to have the capability of countering bad things, which would be in a position of defense. I wouldn't say it's like, well, we have necessary evils of doing bad things. That's my understanding. Abe Dinkus says it's going along to get along by not being informed. Yeah, right. So nice just means like docile, placating, domesticated, emasculated men. That's what I think of when I think of a nice guy. It's like you in a fight, you're useless. When I need you, you're useless. You're nice. But you're not dangerous to our enemies, which is a bad thing in general. Now, I don't know where Kieran went off to, but I did want to switch gears real quick because, as I've said before, I've not actually been to Ireland. At some point, I'd like to, but vacations are not cheap these days, and especially housing is bad, but also lodging is probably not all that much better if I wanted to be a tourist there. But real switch, kind of, we'll make a transition here. So I think the Irish people culturally are known for being happy-go-lucky, and also known for being a bit temperamental, socially. Would you associate? Oh, go ahead.
I said definitely on that. Very, because they're mostly all red-headed people.
And are you saying there's an association with redheadedness and
Yeah.
some kind of demeanor?
Yeah, red-headed means you've got a temper.
Yeah.
So it does, yeah.
Now, Teriak, I don't think he's a redhead, and I actually haven't seen him have a temper. You're more the happy-go-lucky type, I would say.
He-
Yeah, like this is the whole thing of what they're trying to do in Ireland as well, because they're trying to claim now like that, like, oh, there was Black Irish. But when you talk about like going back in the histories, and anytime they refer to a clan as being like that's like the dark or the black clan, it would be that they wouldn't be fair hair, they wouldn't be ginger or blonde or whatever, they'd have black hair. You know what I mean? So I would have been called a unfair dove. You know what I mean? Like I would have been like, and dove is the Irish for black, right? But like how in Irish, like when you're talking about like a black man or like an African, for example, you'd call him Gurm, which is blue. It'd be blue man. And if you're trying to say like the devil, it would be unfair dove. Like the black man is the devil, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? What they're trying to do is they're trying to like rewrite history and say like these clans that were known as the dark clans, that they were actually black people. You know what I mean? Which completely goes against it. But in terms of like that mix that you're seeing between like Irish people having like the red hair, that's distinctly an Irish trait, or some sort of like Gaelic or Celtic trait, and like this goes back to the whole kind of ancestral origins, where it's like you go back to like how we get the name Caucasian, like from the Caucasus Mountains. It goes all the way back to Iran. That's why like the name Erin, the Irish name for Ireland is Erin, is basically the same thing of like as Aryan. Essentially, it goes all, and that's what the Iranians call themselves. They call themselves Aryans. You know what I mean? Whereas when you look at like the German, like think of like Germany, Poland, and like Scandinavia, like they're typically like the blonde hair, and like they're to have like a couple of
Yeah.
gingers maybe sprinkled in kind of thing. Like that dark hair would have been kind of more so of like the Roman influence, and things like that kind of thing. But in terms of like the general kind of like Irish kind of attitude, it is that kind of like free spiritedness, you know, like the poet or the what would be the word? Like that kind of like leprechaun, like free spiritedness, kind of like you know, sure, fucking isn't life a drag anyways? There's no point of having a draggy mentality kind of thing. But there is that thing of like once you do cross that line with an Irish person, seeing what happened in Belfast, you know what I mean? A lot of global warming takes place, you know?
Well, it's just interesting though. Do you? So it sounds like what you've expressed is some kind of optimism born from pessimism.
Yeah. Like this whole thing of like you don't ask God for an easy life. You ask God for a strong spirit. You know what I mean?
Because life isn't easy.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like part of life is suffering, and what develops character, what develops, and this is a whole reason why like a lot of the best comedians would be English, Scottish, Irish, Welsh, and all that stuff, is because like it's a tough history. Like this whole thing of like the look of the Irish. I can't remember who has the quote, but when you look at the Irish history, we haven't exactly been fucking lucky. You know what I mean? So like this
No.
whole thing of like the look of the Irish and stuff, like to go through the famine and all this kind of stuff. But part of having that as your history is to realize, listen, like we've been through far worse before.
That's why
You
we're
know?
lucky.
Exactly.
Because we've been
To get through
through
that.
it. Yeah.
My dad told me that there was a thing. So like many invaders do, the Gaelic language was banned in Ireland, so they weren't allowed to speak
We
their
weren't
own.
allowed to speak Gaelic. It
Yeah,
it wasn't allowed in the schools. No.
and
I know.
and also so there are certain songs which are written as like love songs, and they'll often speak about a flower or something like this. They're speaking about the country of Ireland, but it's in code, so that they couldn't speak against the crown. So they'd write sort of nationalistic songs about their own people and their own country, but they'd kind of code it as like a love song. Similar thing I think happened in Russia as well. I think Russians had a similar process. And I know, like wherever it is, they do that martial art, a capoeira, I forget what country it's in, but that was the same. They were banned from learning martial arts. They developed a dance, and the dance happened to be effective in fighting. So
It wasn't river dance, was it?
no, it wasn't. No. But yeah, basically, yeah, Ireland had a pretty rough trot. There were folk songs about being pushed off the land, like the good land. So they
Yeah.
had to like try and plow rocks. There's a song called "The Rocks Are Born," um, which is about literally being pushed onto rocky land and having to try to grow crops because all the good land was taken by the whoever it was, like if it was barons or lords or whatever. And hence the potato famine was such a big deal because that was a staple of the diet. Was the potato. Hence the jokes about potatoes and
We
Irish. And
still live, we still live on potatoes, for flip's
yeah,
sake.
yeah. My mum used to make bread. My mum used to make bread out of out of potatoes.
Yeah,
The old
potato bread.
yeah, potato bread or soda bread.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what we cook in our fries, our Ulster fries.
yeah. One of the things I actually found really interesting, Shazzy, was because I moved to Australia when I was so young. When I went to school in primary school, I didn't have any friends that I grew up with to start school.
Yeah,
So even though I'm white and I speak English, I copped a lot of flack about my accent when I first got here. I had a very strong Irish accent. Um, got a lot of flack about that. Was kind of an outsider, and I never really understood much about Irish culture and about where I came from. My parents had a few friends from the migrant hostel in a place called Springvale that had a lot of Irish and English and Belgians and Germans, and they formed a group of friends who were Catholic, Protestant. They'd all left that behind, and they had a good group of friends. And I got a little sense of the culture, but I've got to tell you, I was watching The Commitments, that movie.
I love
Um,
that movie.
so do I. It's one of my
But
favourite.
I love Andrew Young singing. I think he was a real good singer.
Yeah. So I was watching that, and there was a scene with a group of older ladies. They were little, and they had dark hair, and
Hmm.
they looked like my mum. God rest her soul. Right. So, and I thought, wow, that looks like, for the first time in my life, I had this sense that's my people. That's my people because they literally looked like my mum and her sister, and I didn't
Hmm.
realize that there was actually like you have there's a biological sort of signifiers. If you see
Yeah,
Polish people, often you can tell they have a kind of a round face, or there's Greeks have certain kind of hair. There's things you can kind of recognize, these subtle differences that you can identify with, and it was really astounding. And I thought, wow, that's really I came from somewhere, right?
yeah.
That's where I
Yeah.
came from.
All right. When you look at me, though, I know I have probably a quarter Portuguese in me, but when you look at me and you've heard how Irish my name is, would I be
Mhm.
considered Black Irish
If
in
you have
terms of like a
dark,
black hair?
yeah, dark hair would be
Yeah,
like Black Irish.
you're a dove. Isn't that what the word is? Dove?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dog?
No, dove,
I'm
D-U-B-H.
D-U-E-A?
D-H is a V sound in Irish.
Oh yeah, like Slangeva, right? Or is that or is that Gaelic or Scottish? Or I know Slangeva that you use an H for a V sound.
Mm-hmm. And then like Saive, for example, like Saidhdbh is Saive. That's
What
pronounced
is
Saive.
So what is the origin of Black Irish then? Because when I think Black Irish, I kind of think of Thin Lizzy and the lead singer of that band.
Again, like it goes back to like how the clans would like there'd be, let's say, like, say Finnegans, and like there'd be one part of the family that would produce like ginger hair or fair hair or like blonde, and then
Oh yeah,
let's say there'd be another section of the clan that would have like the dark hair. Then you'd
that's
have
right.
like there'd be the fair haired Finians, and then there'd be the dark haired Finians. And that's where like Black Irish originated. But now they've rewrote it to the point where it's like, oh no, like the Black Irish, like those were like black people that were in Ireland at that time, and it was all just a bunch of bollocks. But it's the same thing of like when you look into like Rosa Parks and all this kind of shit. It's like these people are literally just pushed as to this whole kind of like to lay the foundations for like this whole multiculturalism is our greatest strength and all this kind of shit. But this is why I got into a conversation with it was like Chris Ferrier, a couple other people were on the panel when we were kind of talking about this, where it's like nation, a certain part of the nation is your ethnicity, which is that like shared origin. And we all come from like one clan, or we all come back from like a group of clans, so to speak, and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
My
like these people, like for example, like a Nigerian coming to Ireland, like he will never, even if he has an Irish passport, like he would never be considered Irish because he's not part of the clan, not part of like the family or the lineage, or he does not have the shared origins. Now, if the black man had like from Nigeria marries an Irish woman and they have a kid, the kid could be considered Irish because the kid would have that lineage or that like origin from the Irish woman. But in terms of like this whole thing of where we're basically at a stage now where like no one really seems to be able to identify like what makes you a particular nationality. Is it your passport? Is it a piece of paper? Or is it that actual aspect of your shared origins? And it seems to be like an uncomfortable conversation that people are unwilling to have. But it's going to be like now's the time for it. Otherwise, you know what I mean, we're basically going to be victims of like this left wing ideology where, you know, multiculturalism is our greatest strength. Because otherwise you're just gonna like essentially wipe out the histories, wipe out the culture, and what are we left with then? What would
what we
delineate
can
an
all
Irish
get
person
on.
from an English person?
It's something I noticed when I went to France. God, it must have been 10 years ago. That would have been more. But I was visiting some of my ex-wife's when we were married. We were visiting some of her relatives in France, and we spent a weekend in Paris. And it was pretty much what you would expect. It was, you know, the buildings. We've all seen the photos: the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and all the buildings. They literally do have the flower pot things on the windowsills and things like that. The
And they literally
cafes
have the striped long sleeve shirts, and they're riding
and the
their big wheel
baguettes
bicycles, and they've
yeah,
got a
yeah,
baguette in the
and the
basket in the
beret.
front. They got their little
Well,
hat.
the interesting thing was at the cafes they don't sit the seats facing each other. They sit them all facing the road. So you're like at a theatre. So you're having your coffee and your pan de latte or your pan de chocolat, and you're looking out and sort of watching the world go by. And there was a couple of little pockets where there was like tents in the median strip in the middle of the road or on the side of the road. So they were like the homeless kind of migrants. Only a couple of pockets here and there. And if you look now at footage of Paris, it's unrecognizable. Okay, the buildings are the same, but it's literally unrecognizable in terms of the demographic. And I think to Teriak's point, this idea of what's a culture, I think it's deeply connected to history. So, and to continuity. That's where the problem comes. It's very hard to define. Like, for example, my dad, 3 or 4 generations back, they came from Italy. So on dad's side, only 3 or 4 generations Irish, but on mum's side, her surname's a very old Irish name. I can't track my mum's history. I don't have there's a whole thing there. But so you know, the question was, am I Irish? Well, yes, I was. We were deeply embedded in the culture. And then when I come to Australia, my dad he denounced our. We could have had a dual citizenship as a British citizenship and an Australian citizenship. And he said, no, we're Australians now, so we'll denounce the English or the British passport and we'll become Australian. Now, he still had very strong links to Ireland and was proud of that. But I certainly grew up adopting Australian sort of culture and values, and I consider myself Australian. But that's the same things happening here in terms of multiculturalism, right? So we also have an Indigenous people here. And so the question always arises about who's the true Australians. And then if you go back a couple of hundred years when the country was kind of federated in 1901, it's basically a Western country. But now with all the sort of open immigration, we haven't got open immigration our government was very harsh on stopping the boats. Was a slogan here. We had boats arriving in the north from Indonesia, and our government took a very hard crackdown on that, plucking people out of international waters and taking them to an island like Nauru. So they're outside the legal system of Australia, but so we don't need to worry about due process for them. And we have a deal with Nauru we had a deal with Nauru that they'll just house them in prisons. That stopped the boats, but there are people who are indefinitely in prisons on these islands because they tried to come here. So, and then we've had a big thing here about multiculturalism. We really embraced the sort of Greek culture when that sort of came. Started off with some tensions. There were slur words for Italians and Greeks, but for the most part, that's all good. And then even the Asians, that they've all sort of become like a part of the culture as well. We don't seem to have that racial divide on those grounds. But what we are seeing now is in the advent of October 7, big, huge divides between the Palestinians and, well, a lot of aggression from the Palestinian supporters here, like insane in the streets every Sunday, big protests, big marches, and then of course we had the Bondi Beach massacre a little while ago, which was the first massacre.
That was bad.
Yeah, the first massacre we've had here since 1980 or something, or that's when they took away all our guns the last time. So what we're seeing is an import. We have our own divisions within the country, but the real division is actually between two groups who have come here, right? And they're playing out their war in our country. That's
an imported war.
Yeah, imported the war. So I've kind of sidetracked from where you were going, but I think it still speaks a bit to what Tariaq was saying about the multiculturalism being it's not a strength. It's not a strength.
No, clearly not. You can't have competing ideologies and have that be a strength. It's going to be at best a distraction. It's going to be at best a deviation of time, effort, and resources. And so it by definition, it cannot be a strength. You have to have uniformity to be a strength. I mean, you don't try and like alloy steel and copper together or steel and tin together, right?
Well, you can even go to a finer aspect of that. I think it's is it the Jehovah's Witnesses who don't celebrate birthdays, or they don't do Christmas or something? There was something like that. There was some Protestant sect that didn't celebrate some common Christian celebration. There was one particular one.
Jehovah's Witnesses, I wouldn't consider them Christian because I don't think they believe in the deity of Christ. Abe Dinkus is asking, who was the shooter that got Australia's government to ban firearms?
Martin Bryant.
Well, now you know. Speaking of culture, real quick though, as far as Ireland, what I would like to know, let's say you have somebody from outside of Ireland, they're from Germany, they're from Sweden, or they're from Greece or wherever, and they come to Ireland. What kind of culture shocks are they going to have that are distinctly Irish signatures to their culture? How they treat people, how they interact with each other. What are things that are distinctly Irish in terms of custom and interaction?
From like the Germans, like we have a general thing of like taking the piss out of each other, which is like just like the whole kind of like roasting kind of like culture and all this stuff, where the Germans would be more proper. You know what I mean? That if you were to insult someone, it could never be a sign of love and all this kind of stuff. I would say like the drinking culture is a bit more kind of loosey goosey, where it's almost assumed that like like day drinking and all this kind of stuff would be a regular kind of like experience. But like as far as like when it comes to like that kind of like heartland of Europe, like the northern part of Europe, like a lot of like we have like a shared kind of like ancestry, like coming from a common people, so to speak, in terms of like with Germanic or even like Scandinavian. That's why I mentioned like, for example, like the Vikings and all this kind of stuff as well. It's basically like previous clans that
Religion.
kind of went different ways and stuff like that as well. But there is like a lot of kind of like shared things rather than like differences. But like just like I said, that kind of like free spirited, kind of like poetic, kind of like soul is typically kind of like the way of kind of like describing kind of like the Irish kind of culture.
Some have strict morals, so you
That's
know
another thing as well.
we do have strict morals in Ireland. We definitely do.
Yeah,
If
I remember being raised like conduct was everything. Like I think
Oh,
my
yeah.
grandpa on my dad's side, I think he was a telephone pole operator, telephone pole worker, and then my great grandpa was a fireman, which is also in America a traditional Irish thing, like being a police officer.
Yeah.
There was there's also at least with my dad, I assume, and Shazzy can correct me if I'm wrong. You sort of cared what the neighbours thought,
Yeah.
right? That was that was important.
Definitely.
When my dad also, God rest his soul, when he and my mother got engaged, I think they were 17, and mum had trouble at home, and was whether she was kicked out of the house or she left, and she turned up on a snowy night at my grandparents' house. So my dad's parents and the family were there. My dad was there. His fiance turns up and in the snow needs somewhere to stay, and Dad said, "Well, you can stay here." And my grandfather said, "No, you're not." And Dad said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you're engaged. You aren't married, so you aren't sharing a roof with your fiance." So they shipped her off to my aunties. I think my grandmother had 12 sisters, so they found someone to sort of to take care of that. So I had a strong sense of that growing up, and honesty. My dad was real big on that. I don't know if that's a particularly Irish thing, but
Yeah.
and not snitching. I got in trouble at school one time, and this is I think this is actually a cultural thing. I got in trouble at school for doing. I was in some place I shouldn't have been with a couple of
Snip
mates.
the bitches. That's the
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. I was in a place where I shouldn't have been, and we were kind of teasing some younger kids and whatever. I forget what it was, but the school they complained. The coordinator came and got me, and they said, "Look, we know you were there. We know you were doing it. We know you had two friends with you. Who were they?" And I said, "Oh well, I'm happy to cop my punishment, but I'm not going to be sort of telling on my friends." And he said, "Well, call your dad." And I thought, "Yeah, call him." I said, "Call him. Yeah, I'd be happy with that." And Dad came in and they said, "Look, we want to know who these guys were." And Dad said, "Look." Dad said, "I'm Irish. I'm a union man." He said, we don't snitch." And the coordinator said, "Well, he'll get twice the punishment." And Dad said he'll take it. So, and I was proud of that. I was happy to go because, and so that was the kind of thing that he installed in me. And I think that was a part of that culture there. And also another part was, I remember when I went back in '81. Like I said, I was about 11 years old. At night, you might get visitors. They'd come down the street, and I really perceived this sense that you open the door, but yep, come in. We'll sit by the fire. You're off the street. There was almost this sense of being out
Hospitality.
there. The hospitality, but it was
We
also,
are very hospitable. Yeah, we
yes,
do.
very very hospitable. My dad,
We
if my
don't
dad,
we don't lock our doors. You can just come in.
we have a thing in Australia called BYO, which is bring your own alcohol. So if I threw a barbecue or a party, the offer
Yeah.
would be BYO. So I'll do the meat and the food and bring your own drinks. My dad, for him, that was a completely foreign concept. He said, if I'm throwing a party, I'm supplying everything, and he would have an oversupply of everything every damn time, right?
And that'll be a pride of the household. That we are hospitable. You come over, it's always going to be a good time. You're going to be well fed. You're going to, we're going to have fun.
And we are very kind people. We are kind people.
Can I just say, I've got a theory about Irish influence, at least in the South in America, because what happens, if you listen to country music, it just sounds like a different flavor of Irish folk music in terms of the fiddles and in terms of like the pacing in some ways. Obviously, country is going to be different, but you can hear the relationship between like the song structure, the story structure of both country music and Irish folk music.
Yeah.
You can, and also on top of that, you mentioned the hospitality. The South is known for their hospitality. You mentioned roasting people in terms of showing affection. The South does that a lot.
We joke.
Southerners do. So
We're terrible. We're terrible jokers. We like to play jokes on people. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, we are. I mean, the Irish, I think, are known for having this mischievous side. I know I've got it in terms of like, if I say this, I'll probably get this reaction, in this panel or something like that. It's like if there's a fuse, what happens if you light that fuse? That's the Irishman's question.
There's a different with the music. You're correct about the relationship there, but I spend a little bit of time. I became interested in Irish music, and I was sort of learning. I had a penny whistle, one of those little penny whistles. I was learning how to play that, and I was learning how to play some Irish songs on guitar. If you go back a little further, the music is quite different. It's very distinct and very moving. They use different
storytelling.
storytelling,
They're
but
very good storytellers. Irish are.
there's also something about the melodies in their older music. The timing, they often use like a 6/8 timing, which is not really used much these days. And
not outside of jazz.
And there is something. Well, what do they say? A difference between a jazz musician and a rock musician. A rock musician plays 3 chords in front of 4,000 people. A jazz musician plays 4,000 chords.
4,000 chords in front of 3 people.
so
that's funny.
So yeah, the music is very distinct and very moving, and
a lot of good music comes out of Ireland. A lot of good singers, and bands and stuff come out of Ireland.
And Teriak, I think you adjacently brought up comedians, and this, I know he's not technically from Ireland, but I think the quintessential Irish American is Conan O'Brien. Just because he loves that mischief so much and that chaos, and he thrives in chaos. And if he can't find chaos, he will make chaos in order to thrive in it.
Oh, 100%. Like again, a good old ginger as well to represent the boys, as they would say. But it, like I think that like that trickster spirit, just take one look at the Avatar and all this kind of stuff, like the Loki element, this kind of like mischievous kind of thing, because exactly the locos. But
dude, that's a double entendre there. You got the loco, and it works for Spanish as well.
I tell you, man, you know what I mean? And like this whole thing of like, I often kind of like describe it as like the Irish mentality is like instantly what goes your head is what is the most inappropriate thing to say at this moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can't help yourself.
Yeah.
I can't escape it. I have this no matter I try and calm myself, ground myself, read the Bible, remember what the best thing to do is in every situation. But there's always this box inside the back of my head is like, what is the worst possible thing that could cause the most disaster? And this, nope, shut up.
You're fighting against your Irishness at that stage, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is one of those things that where it's like the mischief almost reveals the truth. You know what I mean? Because like a good example I always use is I'd say, "Oh, how was your day?" You're gonna get the same response, grand, or I'm good, or I'm fine, or like these kind of words that essentially like have no fucking meaning. But if you insult someone in a loving way, right, and you get like a very kind of like aggressive response, then it's like, okay, he's not having a good day, like fucking like go about it like that thing. But if he joins in the crack and all this kind of shit, then you're like, okay, he's going well. So it's almost like it cuts through the bullshit.
Yeah, I would say, what's up with your fucking face? So
yeah,
are you gonna crack a smile on that?
I guess it's very telling because what was it? It was that Chris Lestrange was running a Rev funding stream for Rev's move. And I remember Bricky is one of the goats as far as online roasting. I can't think of anybody who is more agile on their feet in terms of that.
Oh, he's
Now,
a pussy.
Bricky's English. Okay, we'll do it. Okay, fine. You have a roasting battle with Bricky. Let's see what the poll looks like.
I have before.
But it's interesting because I made an offhand comment about him and Peaky Blinders, and he didn't really have anything ready for me. And so, based on what you just said, Teriak, you must not have been having a good day.
Possibly, or he just didn't watch the show, and he's like, I don't know if it's he's basically caught in that moment where he doesn't know if it's a compliment or if it's an insult. You know.
Another thing about
I think he knew exactly what I meant.
Another thing about Ireland is what I can't understand about Americans. As soon as we have our kids, they're christened into the church. As soon as they're old enough to go to Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that nowadays. You don't. We before we're 13, we have learnt our catechism. Like I had to do mine for 13.
Call it confirmation. We call it
Confirmation. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, there's a huge Baptist influence in America. There are Presbyterians, and there are Episcopalians and Lutherans and people who do that culturally. But there's two things. There's the Baptist tradition, which believes not in paedo-baptism, but credo-baptism, meaning that it's not you being baptized as a child, but it's you being baptized upon your own conscious understanding and acceptance of Christ. And then there's also the fact that we have Enlightenment stuff put into our thinking from the founding. And so the Enlightenment stuff is going to be very individualistic. And that was also, I would argue, a result of the Protestant Reformation. I think that the Protestant Reformation was necessary, but it had side effects that were also just inevitable as a result of it. And the Enlightenment would be one of them. I have no problem saying that. So there's a couple reasons for that, and the mindset of the parents would be that my kid is going to be an individual. They're going to check for themselves, and not because it's right or whatever, but because I'm not going to force it, beyond what I could expect from them.
As long as you teach them morals, that's all you can do.
That's the best you can do. Train the child in the way he
best.
should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So that's Proverbs.
There was almost a expectation just about in the Irish Catholic families that at least one son would become a priest. It was kind of I don't know if it was how solid a rule that was, but there kind of was. So like most families wanted to have a priest.
It was the same, I think, with the nuns. With the
really?
Catholic side too. Yeah.
Kind of like how if you're like Indian, you're going to be a doctor or an engineer, or if you're Jewish, you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor. With the Irish, somebody's going to be a clergyman or a clergy woman. I don't know if that's a term.
Well, a nun, a sister, So, that was a pretty big. The religion side of it was very, very much a part of the culture. When we come to Australia, if we went on a holiday somewhere, like we had to travel to go on a holiday, Dad would make sure there was a church nearby. So if we were there on a Sunday, we could go to church, because the Catholic thing is you go to church every Sunday. So that type of commitment to it,
Yeah, and speaking of expectations and generations, I also wanted to compare and contrast Teriak being a younger guy, and then Shazzy Bear being less young as Teriak.
Less young. Well said.
What is it like for less young generations reflecting on how it is with younger generations, and vice versa with Teriak, in terms of how things are distinctly within Irish culture about what is popular, what is unpopular, and what's different between two different generations of Irish people?
Like from my aspect, when I was like going through school, like for example, like the American equivalent would be like high school or middle school, kind of like that kind of section. Like that's when like the church was what's known as like the church scandal, like the whole like Catholic Church covering up the PDF and all this kind of shit.
Yeah.
That was kind of like it was being openly discussed and being talked about, even though there was kind of rumors and murmurs, like in the let's say the previous generation, is just something that you just never talked about. And that was like looking back on it, like that was basically used as like the fuel to try and kind of push atheism across Ireland, or to try and make people like lose their faith in terms of like that aspect. So like typically, and like we're kind of talking about there, where the expectation was that like someone in the family was going to end up in like the clergy and all this kind of stuff. It was more so seen as like the priests and all this kind of like the Father Murphy jokes and all this kind of stuff was always like the PDF and all this kind of shit. So you've seen basically like a mass like sterilization of like faith across Ireland. And it's a sad sight to see, because like I said, like we're kind of talking about like the whole aspect of a nation and a culture being important. Like religion is something like that sets or instills like those morals into it. Now obviously like in Northern Ireland it'd be kind of a different story, where it's more so kind of like grounded in the fact of the troubles, and it being like that was basically the divide across it. But that would be the main kind of thing that you'd see at least in kind of like the youth of nowadays, is that like this whole appreciation for your religion, and kind of like the atheism that you're starting to see in terms of the youth, like that was basically the rhetorical device that was used for it. um and even just like the kind of whole aspect of like the country life or the rural life, like a lot of kind of the youth would be kind of going to cities or just emigrating out of the country at this stage, rather than
Yeah.
actually wanting to like get a couple of acres, set up your farm, and actually kind of like work the land and all this kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I saw that in some of the videos I was watching. How people are just like, "Oh, forget it. I'm just going to abandon it because it's not a failed state, but a state that can't be itself for sure."
Well,
And Shazzy, oh, go ahead, Kieran.
Oh, sorry, mate. I'm just going to on that point. I don't mean to interrupt. The actor John Cleese left England. He just said it's not English anymore, and so he just left. He said it's not English anymore. So I
What a
think he lives
bigot!
there. I know, right? So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, yeah, go ahead, Shazzy.
I watched all the Troubles, and I'm so glad to hear now at 60 that the Troubles between Catholic and Protestant are over.
hmm
That is a big thing for quite a lot of people. You weren't allowed to play with Catholics or anything. That's how bad it was. I did have a boyfriend who was a Catholic, and I
Naughty.
actually was in love with him. And this was only a few years ago. I'd say maybe 16 years ago. And they found out he was Catholic, and he never came back.
Mm.
That was
That's
that
like
over. That's how bad it was.
yeah, that's terrible, Shazi. That's like what you were saying before, re-examination. That if you said a white family didn't want their daughter to marry a black guy, that fits into a kind of a stereotype that you can imagine.
You're
But to
brought up with
imagine,
that.
but to
Yeah,
imagine people who all look the same, but because of your upbringing, because of your religion,
religion.
yeah, that's the determining point. So, like it used to be
I
for
made sure
example,
I didn't bring my kids up like that because I had seen the mistake.
yeah, my dad too. Well, you should have seen when I started. My first wife was English. I met her when I was 15 here in Australia. She had a T-shirt. We were into the punk scene, and she had a
Mm.
T-shirt that was made of a Union Jack flag on the front and the back. It was like a sleeveless T-shirt. So it's basically two flags, two Union
Yeah.
Jacks. And I come home wearing it. Me dad, he's so funny. He he had left all that behind, and he had friends who were English, and he had a couple who were a Protestant and Catholic, married each other, an English woman who married an Irish guy. This was his friend group and my parents' friend group. But still the idea that I'm coming home wearing a Union Jack,
Mhm.
just he had the kind of just. He said, "Well, I guess it could make a good doormat." Okay, so it was so
Well, it's
it
like
was
it's
kind
like,
of
hold on, Dad. Have you seen the country you moved to? Have you looked at its flag lately?
yeah, the one that you said that we're going to be a part of now. Like
And
in
now
Mickey
you would have
Mouse.
this big outrage. Like, come on.
Yeah, yeah. No, he was
But
cool. He was cool like that. Like I said, he was proud of culture and history, but at the same time, um, the reason they left Ireland was because of the Troubles.
Yeah.
I asked Mum why we left, and she said because there was no place to raise kids at that
Yeah.
time. So, and probably knowing myself, I probably would have grown up. I would have been one of the kids wearing a balaclava throwing rocks at armored cars.
Yeah.
Because my dad kind of instilled in me a kind of an ideology and also the
I
idea
just
of
knew not to bring a Catholic home. That was it.
yeah,
That was a no-no.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like
It's really crazy.
a distinct part of it though is that it's like it's often said that like racism is part of Irish culture, and what I mean by that, it's like if I was to move, let's say, to the west of Ireland, I'd be considered a blow-in. I wouldn't. I'd be considered like a foreigner essentially to the west
Yeah.
of Ireland and all this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like for example, like even the particular counties, like all your like your Jew jokes, typically like the Jew jokes, like being cheap and all this kind of shit, like that'd be everybody from Cavan. Like Cavan was renowned as being like tight bastards. Like a typical thing that'd be said is like a Cavan man eats his dinner in a drawer. They'd be afraid that if someone was to call at the door, that they'd say, "Oh, I'd have to give him a bite to eat and all this kind of stuff." Going back to Shazzy and Kieran saying being hospitable and all this kind of shit. Having people like they'd eat their dinners in the drawers because as soon as the doorbell ring, close the door and be like, "Oh no, we don't eat dinner here." Essentially, like that would be the attitude there. You know what I mean? The Cavan man would bring his children to Santa's grave, so he'd have to avoid buying them presents each year.
Oh, we would keep the 10,000 here.
That's funny.
I love
But
that. That's hilarious.
I remember, I can't remember what age I was, but I remember the moment that I realised that Irish jokes were racist, right? Because I loved jokes and stuff. I was a bit of a clown when I was a kid, and I think it's
Can't
part
see
of
it.
how I.
I'm kidding.
Well, it's no, you can't tell. I think it's kind of how I got through that early stages. I had to, do something. So,
Isn't that how the
um,
Irish get through everything? Through sharpening their humor?
yeah. And I used to tell Irish jokes, and me and Dad would tell Irish jokes. What do you call something? Did you hear about Paddy and Mick bought a set of water skis and then went looking for a lake with a slope, right? Stuff like this.
Yeah.
So
What do you call an Irishman hanging from the ceiling?
an electric
Chandelier.
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 Yeah.
Wait, what? What is that?
What do you call an Irishman hanging from
Oh,
the ceiling?
chandelier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we.
Okay. Two gingers are in a car. Who's driving? The constable.
Well, you see, so I would be telling all these jokes as a kid, and then I think what it was, I learned about Polish jokes in America. Like they had jokes like, what are the oh, hey, missing mod,
What do you
good to see
call an
Missing
Irishman
mod. Raise them up
dead
for the
for
missing mod.
1,000 years? Pete.
Pete. Yeah, so we had I remember learning about the fact that Polish jokes in New York were racist. Like, what do the Poles do in New York? Well, they hold up the power lines, right? Or something like this. But I discovered that Irish jokes were actually they were kind of derogatory. They were meant to make Irish people look stupid, make us all
Right.
look like we're just drunk idiots. I'm afraid I'm not really breaking the stereotype. Um,
No
and
Irish need apply. All that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then I thought, why am I telling Irish? Like, why am I being derogatory to myself? And then there was a TV show here called Hey Hey It's Saturday, and it used to be
You're
huge.
Irish.
Yeah, it was called Hey Hey It's Saturday morning, and then they moved to the evening. It started as a kid show, and then it became an adult entertainment show. They'd have music, they'd have jokes, they've all comedians and shit. And they actually brought up the idea that instead of Irish jokes, let's create a country, and they called it Biddleonia. So they said a couple of Biddleonians walked into a bar, right? So, and that also struck me as they also recognised that the jokes were actually derogatory and they were meant to put Irish people down. I don't care now. Like I couldn't give a shit now because I think with time,
No, I like
perhaps
Irish jokes.
yeah, so do I. Like perhaps back in the time when they were used that way, sure. When you're being pressed off your land, when you're being banned from speaking your own language, and there's jokes about you being kind of stupid and drunk and silly, that might have been a thing. But now it's water off the duck's back. I'll tell any Irish joke you like, because I think the time gap's been enough that it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Right. And then part of it too, I think, would be if you can roast each other, you can also roast yourself.
Yeah, well, Bill Burr actually, what Terriac was saying before about Irish comedians and stuff. You know the comedian Bill Burr?
Of course.
Yeah.
Bostonian.
So,
Boston is a huge hub for Irish people, both originating from Ireland and just having ancestry from Ireland.
and you know, before Bill Burr got married, when he was like pretty based, and when he was hanging out with Patrice O'Neill and people like that, he told a story about he went to Ireland. He was doing a show in Ireland, and I forget what the opening was. He was going to tell a joke, or he was talking about something, and he said something the equivalent of, I forget what it was, but it was something like, my mum had cancer, and the whole Irish crowd just went, oh.
Oh
They
yeah,
all-
I remember that. I remember
Yeah.
that. And he's like, screw you guys.
Yeah, he's going, what the fuck, these people? They fucking right.
Yeah.
And it's
My
one of the
dad
most.
does that. If I say something along those lines of, something bad happened to me, oh, like it's an opportunity to like jab at you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's yeah, that's a something I've really enjoyed as I've been online for the last couple of years, especially interacting with Americans, because um, so many of them don't know how to take it, and um, sometimes I'll be on panel with another Australian, and we're just going at each other, and or me and Bricky or whatever, or me and Terriac, and I notice some Americans are so polite and so kind of genuine that they don't understand what the fuck's going on, right? But
Oh, yeah,
that
well,
is,
I remember Cypher wanted to like take you out.
oh,
You
was that
remember
on
that discussion?
over on Pages? Yeah,
Yeah,
oh,
AVG, right?
AV, yeah. There might have been a few beers involved that night.
Yeah,
I did.
I would say you really, without going into the details, I think you really pushed that envelope on that one. But I'm sure the Irish have no problem really pushing envelopes. I mean, Terriac, on your show, you like pushing envelopes all the time. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
but I mean, like I've never seen, like, for example, when we were last on Misunderstood's panel, remember that, Kieran? A panel full of Black Americans, right?
Yeah,
And Kieran
yeah.
makes the claim that if he was in charge of deportations, he'd tell all of them to go fuck off back to Africa. You know
Oh
what I mean?
gosh.
Like, it's but this is what I'm saying, where it cuts through the bullshit. You know what I mean? It's like at what point are we going to come to like this whole like sterilized, politically correct, and all this kind of shit? Like, if I was like the shit that happened with like Andrew Wilson and Faddy and all this kind of shit, right? I would have told Faddy to get out into the fucking field and pick some cotton, you fat cunt.
Oh
You know what I
my
mean?
gosh.
Like,
No,
'cause,
no, I'm too American to know what you mean.
Well, you see,
this
we
is
have
what I'm
that.
saying.
We had that Terriac. We have it often on Verbal Combat with Tomahawk, right? He plays right into it. He comes on looking for his reparations, and then like he'll get voted off, and someone will go, "Is it because he's black?" Right? We jump into it. We enjoy it. He enjoys it. We have a great time, and so
Oh yeah, that's because we have a
and, like-
basis with Tomahawk. It's just the people we don't have a basis with. The part of me that's Americans, like, I don't have the social capital to use those kind of jokes, So that's the consideration that the American part of me brings into account is, do I know this person well enough to get away with this kind of joke? Yeah, but yeah, I think the initiation process for Americans into the social group is a little bit different.
it's been interesting. I've almost perceived almost like a bit of, would I say, guilt, or a bit of just this sort of, well, maybe it's just politeness. Maybe it's just politeness. I mean, you're the most powerful country in the world, so maybe you just don't feel the need to shout at people. You can just sit back and know that we've got the bomb. Okay, like that song by Dennis Leary.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Asshole.
Terriac.
I'm an asshole. Holy oh.
But like, if someone's willing to say like what would be perceived at least as like some egregious thing to you, like, that's a good person to have, because like that they're not going to like would be the way. They're not going to like, alter the truth just for it to sound better. They're going to give you the raw, unfiltered opinion. Whereas I think like this culture that we have, like the PC or like the nice guy kind of like culture, is that like we've now kind of said, well, it's more important to be nice than to actually tell the truth or to thing. And like I think that's a kind of aspect in terms of like the what I was saying earlier about the mischievousness or like the say the most inappropriate thing, like where the mind goes there, because it's almost like your basic signal to the person's like if you fuck up, I'm going to be the first person to tell you, but also if you are actually succeeding, I'm also going to be the first person to tell you.
I think it is true that Paul Washer, who's a preacher, once said, "Your best friend is the one who tells you the most truth." But if I'm telling you the truth from my perspective, I'm not going to be like, "Well, I'm going to color code who I'm going to send to which geographical spot." That would not be me telling you the truth. That'd be me like trying to jerk your, trying to pull your leg. So,
well, it is in a way. It is in a way because when you're talking about, for example, race and things like this, especially with people who are being a bit sensitive about it, sometimes I'll say those kind of things. It's to be provocative, but not in a malicious way. It's to
it's to entertain yourself.
No, I found at times any important issue is going to have some heat to it because people care a lot about it, and to get past that heat, sometimes you can stoke the fire. Everyone goes off a little bit. We all sort of let off steam, and the people who are really interested in the conversation will hang around afterwards. And when the dust settles, I've had full-on arguments with people, and we've gone at each other, and then when it calms down for the next hour, we have a great conversation. So there is some method in the madness, but it can be a fine line.
It has a lot to do with tone and how you carry yourself with it, I'm sure. Sharon, I hear something in the distance. Is that you with a penny whistle? Where is Shazzy? She unmuted herself. I heard something. Oh well.
Yeah.
Oh well. So Teriak, when you reflect upon older generations and
No,
how
my actual electric went out.
oh my gosh. Just one thing after another.
If I disappear.
I blame the English. It's how we do. Teriak, when you look at older generations and how they comport themselves in Ireland as opposed to younger generations, oh, she gone. Must have been the word older. What are your reflections on the differences between the older generation Irish and younger generation Irish? Where are the divides there and differences? And what are things that you think the older generation has right and things that you think the younger generation has right?
I think the older generation are more wise. They're a bit more kind of get the terminology, but like they're like less trusting in a sense of where and this is kind of like I think across like we're starting to see like a lot of commonalities across the West with this, where the younger generation will just kind of like gobble up whatever the news tells them, whatever the politicians say. Oh well, they have no reason to lie. They'll always tell the truth and all this kind of stuff. Whereas the older generation, like they're a bit more kind of like not trusting of the government, not trusting of like the media and all this kind of shit. And also kind of like a bit more kind of like I'm trying to avoid the terminology of like wisdom or wise, because it's oftentimes like how do we kind of like
they have
actually define
experience.
that experience, but like there'd be plenty of like, let's say, young people, like they've done a lot of things, but they're still kind of like young in the tooth, like where it's very easy to kind of just like paint a certain narrative and oh yeah, like that's the prevailing theory, and like you can't be going against the prevailing theory and all this kind of shit. Whereas like the older generation have no issue telling you exactly what's on their mind. They've no issue telling you to go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? If you're talking a lot of bollocks and all this kind of shit. Whereas the younger generation is more focused on being like nice and going along to get along and all this kind of shit. Do you know what I mean? Just in terms of like history, like knowing like their history, knowing their ancestry and all this kind of stuff, like that's like I said, like the only way I can really describe it is that it's just been like sterilized to the point where you don't have like the younger generation like that would have like their handful of jokes that they would have ready to whenever they meet a new person, or stories or things like that. It's kind of like this whole kind of like globalist kind of mindset and all this kind of thing is kind of like crept in, and you don't really have like that kind of solid base. Now, I'm speaking generally here. I'm pretty sure if you go to like rural towns, there would be kind of like the youth that would be more in touch with their ancestry, their history, and like their culture and all this kind of stuff. But it's like that's been the whole kind of like vibe where it's like, you know, as we're kind of saying there, like the whole kind of like aspect of like Irish culture, just to say what's on your mind, to say it the way it is or the way you see it. It's kind of like frowned upon to be like that nowadays, and this whole aspect of like the new Ireland and all this kind of bollocks, rather than for the want to like to preserve like I was kind of saying, like that kind of like poetic soul, or that kind of like Celtic kind of spirit, kind of, so to speak. And it is kind of like, especially with like the youth, it's like this kind of arrogance of, oh well, we know better than our elders because we have this technology now and all this kind of shit, rather
Oh
than
yeah.
actually appreciating their elders and all this kind of thing, or
Yeah.
listening
I'm not
to
stupid.
the
I
grandparents.
own an iPhone. Like as if you invented the iPhone just because you bought it from the store. Yeah.
Exactly. And this whole aspect of, well, I've got an AI that'll tell me all these pieces of information that you don't know, and acting as though like you're the one that like is actually doing anything in that process. But all you're doing is just regurgitating whatever the phone tells you to say, which is the same thing with the news, which is the same thing with the politicians. You're just regurgitating. You don't actually have an opinion for yourself. Whereas if you go down to, the rural towns, go walk into a public house, and it'll be out PJ in the corner. Like, he'll have his own fucking interpretation of what things are going on, and he'll actually be able to critically think and at least give his own opinion on things. Whereas with the youth now, it's just basically sterilized. Like, they don't really have any kind of wants or kind of like goals, or they're trying to live someone else's life. Whereas PJ in the rural town, like, he might not be a fucking millionaire, but like at least he's living his own life on his own terms. You know.
This is very odd because usually it's the younger generations that have all the energy, they have all the visions, they have all the ones that, that like usually the older people are like, life is what it is, and I'm not going to try and make it anything differently. And then the young people are idealistic and they have all this gusto and they want to fight and they want to establish things. And what you're telling me is it's pretty much almost the opposite in terms of like who has more gusto and who has more fight in them for a better future. And then the younger generations are now the conforming generations. Is that what you're getting at?
Pretty much. And like that's why I'm kind of saying it doesn't seem to be anything distinct to Ireland in terms of that. It seems to be
Right.
a common picture across the West now, where it's like the youth are just kind of placating to whatever the official narrative is and all this kind of stuff. Now the promising, like, to go not to go black pill or nihilistic on this, is like you are starting to see a resurgence now, especially in America and like the across Europe and Africa, Australia, and Canada. You're starting to see the same thing, where the youth are now starting to kind of say, "No, fuck yourselves! Like, we're not going along with this plot, and we're not doing this feminisms, we're not doing this globalisms, we're not like trying to play the nice guy and all this kind of stuff as well." So that's where I think like you're probably going to see a return to like the more kind of traditional aspect, or just like the more kind of historical and cultural kind of like aspect of the nations, rather than trying to just placate to the masses.
Would you say that because this is a broadly Western trend, that national sentiments and national identity, or even like cultural identity associated with your nation, is being flattened out across the West and homogenized? So when I ask you questions about like, well, what's distinctly Irish about the youth at this time? What's distinctly Irish about, say, Shazzy Bear's generation? Shout out to Shazzy. All the best to her. I hope you get your electricity together. But when it comes to these questions anymore, it's even hard to answer what those things are, what the distinctives are in a current day context, because we're all being cookie cuttered.
Well, yeah, 100%. And the probably the most frustrating thing about this is, right, and you've seen like Rob Noor actually has a video out where he's talking to what I'd call as like the boomer, the Irish boomer kind of like mentality. Whereas if you're to try and like come at it from like a nationalist like perspective and say like these are key things that are Irish and we need to fight for our nation, we need to fight for our culture and all this stuff, they'll say, oh well, you've just been influenced by the Yanks, you've been influenced by the Americans, and you're just following Trump and all this kind of shit. Whereas they're the ones that are saying like, oh no, like you have to have feminism, you have to have all these globalist ideas, you have to have egalitarianism, you have to have all this kind of shit. You know what I mean? To the point where, like we kind of like we're pointing out earlier on with the Henry Novak thing and all that stuff, they're putting this globalism thing above their own culture. They're putting it above their own history and shit like that. Do you know what I mean? And that's like from, let's say, like 40 years of age, or maybe even like a bit above 40, all the way down, where it's like if you were to actually stick up for your nation, you'd just be accused of being a Yank. And it's like, no, like the thing that we'd share is this like nationalist identity that we want to preserve. And that'd be the kind of like the same kind of talking point in terms of what Trump would talk about, or the nationalists in America would talk about. But I wouldn't be saying, oh, like we need to have like, American culture, American ideals, and all this kind of stuff. I want our Irish ideals, but it's that common thing of like that fight to preserve your nation, preserve your own culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I want to ask also. Let's say I arrived in Ireland and you wanted to show me some things that you might be worried in a few generations these things will be gone, like whether it's geography, whether it's nature, whether it is architecture and culture and art. What sorts of things are mainstays of Irish culture that are under threat, even just physically?
So like the rural towns going into like the Gaeltacht regions are like they have been kind of deteriorating. Like Gaeltacht regions, just for the audience as well, is like specifically like areas in Ireland where it's like a rural village and they only speak Irish. Like they will not speak English to you under no circumstance whatsoever. But like that whole aspect, like the Irish language is dying out. Um, and just like these rural towns as well, the whole kind of like immigration thing, like there'd be a town of let's say 10,000 people, and they're putting 10,000 of these like foreigners in, and basically trying to supplant it in terms of like the tradition specific to that region, or the culture specific to that town. It's basically just being removed artificially through like this thing, like even like smaller towns like 5,000 or even lower, they're putting in the same amount of like these like people from Nigeria, from the Middle East, and all this kind of shit. And you really have to like beg the question of like, well, what's going to happen to that area? What do you think is going to happen? Like, especially if you're putting in the same amount of like new people than you are with the people that have been there for decades, if not hundreds of years.
Mm.
The culture
And then
goes.
Yeah. So you got the rural towns. Is there a lot of nature also being destroyed? Oh my
But like
gosh.
that's a whole kind of like aspect to it. Shazzy, shout out to Shazzy. It is what it is. But like there would be, let's say, certain kind of organizations set up to try and preserve like the older kind of like, let's say, like castles, like from the time when we had kings and all this kind of stuff. There would be kind of like that aspect that's trying to be preserved and all this kind of stuff. But in terms of like the like I was kind of talking about, if I was to move to, let's say, a village in Sligo, I'd always be treated as an outsider, or a blow-in, as they'd call me, and all this kind of stuff. Like this whole thing of like, oh, we're globalists now, and you can't treat me different just because I haven't been around here for like decades, or whatever kind of thing, or I haven't married into local, the local families or whatever kind of thing. And like I said, in terms of like getting like that kind of like rural Irish experience, it is this whole thing of like where it's simply, it's not profitable to be a farmer anymore. You know what I mean? Which drives all the young to either the cities or to emigrate. And now you're in this situation where there's no longer young people to take over from the old people. And that brings in to the whole like pension questions and all this kind of stuff. But who's actually going to continue on the Irish culture? Their solution seems to be, we're just going to import in like this multiculturalism culture, which if you have a culture of multiculturalism, you don't have a culture.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I wish I could have Shazzy do her sign off, but she might have to do it through chat. I think it's been a very informative, productive discussion. One of these days I'll have to drop by Ireland, and Australia is also a bit of a hike, but one of these years maybe I'll be able to make it. But I definitely very, shall I say, I hate to use the word proud because proud is a vice, but in the sense of pride of like enjoying the culture that my ancestors come from, I can do that without making any statements about anybody else's value or anything like that. But I definitely wanted to know more, and I still want to know more about Ireland in general. But I think that'll have to come through the experience of actually having flown there and spent a week there myself to see it. But do you guys have any parting words you would like to give us before we bring this to a close?
Yeah, I would just say thanks for having me, mate. It's been a really interesting conversation. I got a lot more out of it than what I thought I would. I think I got more out of it than I put in. So I appreciate that, and appreciate your time and Tariak's time and Shazzy's. It's been a really nice conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
And how about you, Tariak?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Rex, and appreciate you having this episode on Ireland and all this kind of stuff. The one kind of parting bit of wisdom, as I would say to the Americans, is like use Ireland as an example, right? Because what's basically been done with this new globalism culture, they're trying like the whole multiculturalism and all this kind of stuff, is try and find an excuse. This whole like critical theory, critical race theory, deconstructionist, and all this kind of stuff, where they'd say, well, your founding fathers had slaves, so you were slave owners, and now you deserve having your culture be like dismantle all this stuff. Same way for the British. Well, sure, didn't you have slaves and all this kind of stuff? Ireland didn't have slaves, right?
They were
But
slaves.
exactly, but they still justify it now, even for Ireland, to say, well, sure, didn't you emigrate? But when we emigrated, we didn't show up and get fucking 4-star hotels and the government paying us and all this kind of shit. We had to work for our own thing.
They
And
had
like I
to
said, they're now
build.
even exactly, and that like work for your fucking like your food and all this kind of shit. But also this whole thing where they're just gonna like, for lack of a better term, is whitewash history or just change the history to certain things where it's like we talked about, where it's like the Black Irish, where it's like it had to do with hair color, and say, oh no, like what it actually means is there were actually black people here on the island. They're just straight up lying.
We
Just to
was
try and push
Celtic.
this. We was Celtics and shit. You know what I'm saying? Like this whole kind of aspect. So that's why I'd say is like the reason why you'd want to pay attention to Ireland is it does not matter what your history was. It does not matter if you have like a history of slavery or if you don't have a history of slavery. They're coming after your culture, and it's up to you to not let that happen.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a great episode, and maybe if I find out some more and get more in depth with it, we could have another one. But I think we've covered the waterfront here. So, all you guys here at Teriak's channel and Kieran's channel and Reexamination and Shazzy Bear, please subscribe to Teriak. Please go subscribe to Kieran Markin. And if Shazzy has any more content coming up, like live streams like she used to, please